Oh,
Victor,
hello, hello.
how you doing?
Good. I love the picture behind you. Sets a very grand tone.
Yeah, I like it too. So is it yeah, kind
It's
of an Oriental magic?
Oriental, medieval. It's nice because it has this, here we are talking modern, tech, cyber thing, but you have this beautiful link to a rooting to the past. It's nice.
Yes, exactly. How you doing? Where are you based? Portugal?
I'm in Portugal, about an hour north of Lisbon. Been here for 7 years.
Okay,
In Portugal in 7 years. This house 2 years.
right. And where were you before that?
Before that, I was in London for 4 years. Before that, I was in Japan for 15 years.
Wow.
Canada, Poland. I spent 4 years as a kid in Kuwait, but that was in the 80s. So different culture.
Wow. Wow.
Two
You
years in
are,
2 years in the US and 1 year in Russia.
wow. I'm talking to the globe now.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I like that. So you have all the cultures mixed.
I mean, not all. I would say Africa, I haven't connected with at all, really. I mean, I've been to Morocco, South Africa, that's it, but it's a massive continent. So I don't have that culture. Asia, I have a connection with. South America, not so much. But yeah, I mean, North America is familiar, Europe is familiar, Japan, and a bit of Asia.
Hmm. Yeah, and Asia also very kind of like a continent on its own. You've got a
Of
whole
course.
variety of cultures there as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
it's massive.
That's great. Well, I mean, Gian Andrea, spoke very, very highly of you, and he said, "You gotta meet Vector. He was here."
Yeah,
And
it was really great visiting there. It's very interesting how it's developing.
yes. So tell me more. What
Uh,
you're working on? What's the aspiration?
so I'm working on a bunch of things. I spent 10 years, the last 10 years. My background is in software. So I started as a software developer in the trenches, product management and startups. Uh,
Okay.
so that's definitely systems, software, and then really thinking about how to productize that is one of my frames of reference,
Hmm.
agile and all of that. Then for the last 10 years, I've been working to try and build a village and build a village ecosystem here in Portugal and in the world. I've been working remotely for about 20 years. So
Hmm.
I was telling
Wow.
everybody remote work will change the world. And everybody said, oh, you're crazy. Maybe in 50 years, or like, oh, this
Yeah.
is tech. And then suddenly nobody calls me crazy when I say remote work will have big impact
Yeah.
on the world. So that's,
Gone mainstream now.
yeah. And of course, there's a debate, will it be 5% or 50% of the workforce? But even if it's only 5%, and it'll be much more, that's still a massive impact on society, especially
Yeah.
since creative jobs and such. However, so there's lots of people moving out of the cities, as I said, people searching for community because it's easy to move out outside of the city. You get, you're in nature, you get a cheap house, but your neighbors are local people who are very nice, but you're not going to have a conversation about building startups and
Yeah.
regeneration,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's just natural. Everybody wants to live around people that they can have conversations about that they care with.
Yes.
However, moving the real estate world is really, really hard. And it's, real estate is where money goes to have a rest, not to have an adventure. So
Right.
it's been really tough. Now I'm doing a little research group doing interviews with different investors and people developing projects. And yeah, I've done half a dozen interviews, and everybody says, yes, the money is not there. You need to go to high net worth individuals and find somebody that likes your idea and wants to invest, which
Mm.
is, it's hard getting access to that and stuff. So moving from software to real estate, you discover that there is certain areas of business where, the timelines are in decades, not in months like they are in software. So that's been a learning.
Mm.
But along the way, that brought me to regeneration. I mean, I guess I had gone through three different. I started with kind of, I feel a little bit sometimes like a mime trying to, discover what is the box. And I started in 2008 with money, because I was like, oh, wait, money, what is it? Where does it come from? And I spent a few years reading and exploring and understanding the money system and discovering A, how broken it is, and B, that for 100 years people have been saying it's broken and proposing alternative and nothing moves. At which point I was like, get me out of here because I want to do something where I can have an impact in my life. So it's also made me realize now when anybody starts with me and first we fix the money system, I'm like,
Mm.
good luck. I am
Mm.
not I'm
Mm.
not jumping on this project. Somebody needs to work on it. And certainly I appreciate the people who put energy into it, but it's so intertwined with the nation state, with everything. It's a really hard
Mm.
thing to move. Then
Mm.
I spent time in the future of work world, so non-hierarchical organizations. There's a book that came out a bunch of years called Reinventing Organizations. Teal organizations inspired a lot of people. Uh, that movement was really inspiring, but again, it didn't really have the elements for going mainstream, because
Mm.
just self-organization for the purpose of self-organization, it's nice, but let's be nice for the purpose of being nice is not enough.
Mm.
uh, I think now it's going to really connect, and it's really fundamental, even though people don't appreciate it enough, is that with remote work you need to run your organizations completely differently. And I don't care how successful you were in the old system, when suddenly all of your people are not in an office, stick and carrot motivation no longer works. So you either have people that care about what they're doing, or otherwise they'll be walking the dog, watching Netflix or whatever, right? And either finding a job that they do care about, or eventually you discover that they aren't working and you have to fire them. Either way, you really need people that are connected and feel the value and the worth of what they're doing. I think there is not enough conversation around that, but that's what gives me hope for the work system fundamentally changing. And it's very interesting because I've been working remotely for 20 years and having these conversations, future of work and this and that. And it made me really appreciate. And now I see the shift. Remote work is much more than just like, I don't pay for an office and my employees are somewhere else. It fundamentally changes everything. It changes the relationship to work. Also, it makes it much easier and natural for people to work portfolio careers, to work on many projects naturally. And even if you aren't entrepreneurial, you don't want to start a business, one of your friends will. And of course, you want to help your friend or your family member, right? So it just becomes natural to be involved in many projects. In an office, right? If you have a call on some other projects not related, you'll feel weird, or it just doesn't make sense. If you're at home, it's no problem. I'll finish my work in the evening or whatever. I can make space. So I really see the remote work as being the wedge, which will fundamentally change how we work, which then has a massive knock-on impact on all of society. And I think it changes how it fundamentally changes the structures also, right? The potential is there. This in building villages, it's kind of been my drive from moving out of the city, also from growing up in Poland in a without community, without contact with nature. The world is full of lonely people. We've lost our traditional belonging structures of tribe, neighborhood, even families, like extended families. Families used to be tens of people, right? Now you're lucky if it's two or three in many cases. But we need belonging. And then, okay, so we had belonging to the company. You know, you worked for the company for decades, sometimes your whole life, that was your belonging. But now nobody does that anymore, right? So where do we belong? Right. So I really see we need to rebuild belonging structures, and they won't be the same as before because it doesn't make sense. So
Yes.
I'm really interested in this building ecosystems of entrepreneurship, of regenerative entrepreneurship, which to me clearly means building new kinds of structures of belonging, new ways of coming together on projects. You know, for example, something that I've observed is teams actually are often more stable and people have more association with team than the company. Probably you've seen where the company falls apart, or the team, you know, the one person goes and then the whole team moves to another company. Or
Yes.
for a long time, I didn't understand why does in Silicon Valley, why do the big companies keep on buying companies, then throwing out the product? Right?
Mm.
Like, why would you spend 10 million or 100? And then I understood, because if you're Google, it's cheaper to buy a high performing team than to try and build one from scratch, especially if
Right.
you have domain knowledge and thing. You don't need the product, you need a high performing team.
Right.
So, and when you're building a company, actually, you don't need people, you need teams. You need a marketing team, a product team, right? So if you could just go out and find the right teams to come together, it would save you so much effort in the team building and gluing, right? And you could build,
Time. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this is already happening to a large degree. You know, you have your advertising company, your accounting company, your legal company. Unless you're really massive, you won't have this in house. And I see this will progress. And then also we need the structures of, if we're working for equity, how to dynamically distribute equity along these things. So I'm really excited about this intersection of new forms, ecosystems of entrepreneurship collaboration, and how technology will support that. So
Beautiful.
just to finish, sorry about the long monologue, but
No.
I really see that where we're at, we need both the elevation of consciousness, so being globally, you know, love is everything, all of that, and the leveling up of technology. Because if you only have consciousness, you end up either with new age or, you know, that kind of thing. If you only have technology, you end up with meme coins, right? So you need
Yes. Yes.
consciousness and the technology working hand in hand to
Mm.
create the new society that we dream of.
Beautiful. I love that. We're speaking the same language, but obviously we do.
Because
It's
we're,
like we are like a twin brothers that we never met.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is these days, it's really my biggest joy these days is when I meet people, or sometimes somebody gives me a presentation of their idea and I hear them explaining my ideas, and I'm like, yes, we are not alone. We're seeing the same thing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's very funny because I mean, so from what you are saying, I mean, focusing on regenerative entrepreneurship and developing ecosystem around that, um, and giving that sense of belonging, uh, solution, but at the same time using technology to be able to scale this and, bring it to the world in a new form. Um, it's like, you know, it's like what I actually have been experimenting lately. Um, I mean, I'm experimenting on different levels. Some of these experiments are mine, some of them are not mine. I'm just funding them and so on in a way or another, which is beautiful because I don't have to get to do the work myself. I'm trying to buy time in the best way possible. Um, and one of the things that, like in my mind, as a theory of change, um, is uh, working on the system of capital, not necessarily money, thing, but more the system of capital, the economy, how to transit from degenerative economy to regenerative economy for the global well-being. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. Regenerative economy is a kind of a medium to achieve that, but it's not really the goal either. And having that clarity, if we can achieve global well-being without going through that, fantastic. It doesn't matter. So that doesn't become the identity that you adopt. Okay, this is my target. It is a target as long as it achieves that. If it doesn't, then we gotta think about something else. Um, so, and for that, I said that if I look at the business, itself as a leverage point, and how do you work on the outset, okay? Governance model, practices, leadership, all that kind of thing, belonging. But then you have the other side, which is the culture, but then the culture, not the, typical Ivy League culture definition, but more deeper than that, okay? It's the one that driven from the principles of nature, where oneness and interconnectedness, harmony and balance, all these things that exist in a living system, how you adopt that as a value, not consciously, not philosophically, but through embodiment. And through embodiment means that you have to reach a level that you are not driven by fear or desire, but rather than by purpose. And hopefully one day purpose and being becomes one and the same. So you're not even driven by purpose, and that's the ultimate evolution, when being is the purpose. There's nothing outside you that needs to give a meaning for your own existence, uh, other than your own existence itself. When you realize that you are the vast, you are the free, and in that knowing, you know how your identity, expands. But sometimes is being uncomfortable in the unknowing. When you feel you are comfortable in the unknowing, and in the unknowing you are none, then you realize that we are one. When people understand that, beyond the philosophy, but more of a journey of embodiment, and then working on these two. How do you do this in practical ways? Like seeing the evolution of people, really, um, and work on the outset, and then how do you actually scale this to other companies? How do you create an ecosystem where all these come together under a shared economy? A piece that represent all of them, and they work collectively together toward a common goal. Then where they can apply, system thinking and so on to address problems, not in silos, but in one single force, one single entity. So this has been my kind of, work. I've been, and I say work, I mean as like, operating it, not investing in things that may lead to that. You have heard a lot from Gian Andrea, so uh, and he's a big think tank on his own. So I'm not going to repeat what he says and so on. And that's, that journey that he's working on that represent that journey. And for me, I'm taking, maybe that's like tier one, and I'm taking tier two, diving deeper a little bit, and finding how to bring all these big concepts in a practical way. And I'm a very big fan of transition. Okay, so, and meaning that I don't necessarily bring, I can imagine an idea how it probably it is, and I say not even imagine, feel, okay, because I'm not visual, but I can feel how an idea would be in 100 years and bring it to what is it today, how it would look like. And it could be totally different, has no relation whatsoever. But I feel the relation, I feel that relation. So, and that was my work or has been my work in Metalab, which is a company that I acquired and I'm running for the past 3 years. A very typical company, focusing on metal waste recycling and investing in climate tech and circular innovation, and in an industry that is a dinosaur. I mean, metallurgical industry. So nothing fancy, nothing sexy about it. I mean, let's put it that way. But for me, it wasn't important what the company does, but more about how it does it. And it was my biggest experiment. I've been an entrepreneur for all my life, almost except the first 4 years. But also I've been actually in the metal industry for almost all my life. So this is where I built companies, I exited and I built networks and people that I know in the space. Um, but I've done things differently before, and also it's my own journey that has been growing on its own, and even like the relationship, um, uh, like with nature, and I see how it actually grown. I mean, I've been in the metal recycling business for a long time. People say, "Oh, you were, a green pioneer." It's like I wasn't. I mean, I didn't give a shit. It was all about adventure and money. So, and trust me, I dismantled the railway in Sudan back in 2001. The people who worked there, was like close to slavery. I mean, literally, and I profited from that, and I didn't even think about it. It's like, okay, well, I mean, that's how they live. I was like, whatever, I'm coming here to do business. It's not my call. So I was that guy too, and that's all and can evolve and change and become a new version of himself. Um, so one of the things that I learned from this new experiment, um, which by the way, I have a team that is sitting in different countries, and I would say a team as leaders. Some of them, they have uh, uh, big team under them, but it's local, like in Ecuador and Colombia, and so on, where we have big operations. But the leaders, they work kind of remotely together. And I understand exactly what you're talking about. And when you want to make that shift in consciousness, how do you do that remotely? You know? Uh, so I followed a certain path because I was on that path myself, you know. So it wasn't easy to capture what worked in the past 10 years of my life, where I spent a lot of time and money also, I mean, my own self-development journey. And so one of the things that they've been doing or adopting on consciousness evolution is some training about subconscious reprogramming, because you need to get rid of the fears and the desires, you know, what actually, you know, like, well, you know, why am I not doing this? Because I'm scared of doing that, because of this or that, you know, all the things that um, that even if consciously you think it's the right way, your subconscious is designed differently, you will not take the call, you know? Or if you take the call, you fail because, you know, you have a super quantum computer that is against you, you know? And that's your own subconscious. So we've done a lot of work to clean up the garbage. So, you know, they followed a program called Psyche, which is basically four workshops that, you know, and happens in different countries. And everybody is going through that. And now I'm actually designing with the main instructor a combination of all this in one retreat uh, that you know can be called the Consciousness Evolution Retreat. That you know don't have to spread it, you know, for a whole year to go through that, but like you know maybe do it a couple of times or one. So this is something, and I've seen the shift in the people. I've seen the change. Not for me, the change, for their own good, you know. How they became one with themselves, with nature, with uh, and I'm not talking about people who joined the company for that, you know. They were not Jan Andrea. They were not, you know, people who's like, yeah, let's go and no, they were just good people. That's it, you know. There was no intentionality, nothing. It's just a business. So, and seeing that change, it brings a lot of joy, you know, to my life. Uh, and I feel grateful and blessed to be used as as a tool by the universe, you know, to channel that light that become theirs, and hopefully their light become one, you know. So and that's you know in a practical form how this transformation is happening on inside one company, and then looking at all the other stuff you know that I can get access to in terms of like changing ownership to steward owned to you know applying holacracy work did not work, voting system governance model, all that kind of thing. But the biggest underlying factor of all this is that intentionality, you know, that like the whole thing was like the foundation. So a lot of things I don't know, of course, I don't know, you know, what I don't know is a lot more than what I know. And, but one thing I know is that my intentions are, is aligned with the greater good. And for that, I use my intuition, you know, not data. And I'm an engineer by background, but doesn't mean that, you know, I mean, I'm actually going quantum with this thing more than linear. Let's put it that way. And it's working beautifully. And then the next step is like, how do we take this outside, you know, just one single unit? Um, so I heard from G, you know, and Silvana, maybe you met her, I don't know, the Planetary Alliance. Yeah. So, you know, talking about mycelium network and, you know, how mycelium in nature works and so on, and exactly what you talk about from, you know, entrepreneurship ecosystem and, you know, regenerative entrepreneurship. So I said, okay, well, how do we replicate that today? Can we get like, a few people? I mean, talking about like, because collaboration is great, but can we get 5 people to actually collaborate? I mean, really, not collaborate, having a Zoom call or spending good time together, but like really, doing things together, coordinated effort toward a common goal. Um, and in this, I'm a very practical guy, you know. So I could understand the big ideas, but if I stay there, I get frustrated. That's my kind of a style. Which it's okay. I mean, these big ideas need a different type of energy and people for that. That's not my role. And I think this role is being played by Gian Andrea and a lot of other people around him, which is great. I use that as input for me. So the idea for me was this year to launch a regenerative fund, um, an evergreen fund that represent the regenerative economy. And I don't want to didn't even want to call it that way, but that's the main purpose of it. So thinking if we bring entrepreneurs to, I'm an entrepreneur, I run a company. If I bring my company under the ecosystem and in this evergreen fund, and it has a listed security, it's a securitized fund and on Vienna Stock Exchange. So we have this structure that we are looking at in Switzerland. And then I bring up my company under that. Somebody else bring his company, they buy into the security, and then now we own the security that represent our ecosystem. By design, we are tied up. You know, we're not going to talk about how do we collaborate. I mean, we are in this shit together now. So and from an economic perspective, even this is a kind of you are really replicating. I mean, okay, for sure you're diversifying risk and all that, but you are playing all this harmony, balance, interconnected, all these principles, they are acting in reality. You have a company that is at early stage, that's like a seed. You have a company at a later stage, that act as a fertilizer and support that company to grow and so on. Company does not succeed, it doesn't mean it dies. It converts into resources into the same ecosystem. And you just said that, Google buys a company not because they're after the product, but after the team. But we got so much hooked up with this stupid, idea brought by the capital system that we think about a company as a legal entity on paper, and we believed it. Somebody said that, and we believed it is. Beyond that, the company is the fucking people. If they die all, there is nothing. You know, well, I mean, so far, I mean, until talk about real our organizations that work on purely AI, which I haven't seen many of these run by their own. So far, that this is what entities are. So to have that in one box and to experiment that from the meta models on individuals, the leaders basically, and then at the same time working on the collective as well, and building this economic power that hopefully at one point can shift power dynamics. Now, you can put the new practices, the new governance system, how you can be as innovative as you said, bring technology. Okay, how do you make decisions? You have 1,000 people here, how do you do that? And how do you bring consensus? How do you, so all that technology becomes great. And then how do you then when you build economic power, because that's the only language that the world understands, you know, I mean, the world understands uh, who control resources. Unless if you have 1 billion people that, you know, you are the supreme leader inspiring, a huge crowd, that they will just listen to you and you can, you know, and that's not realistic. We don't have Gandhi here, and we don't have Nelson Mandela, and if we do, you know, I'm not sure where they are, but if we are able to, uh, you know, bring this collective, and 1+1 is not 2, is 3, then we will have a seat on the table and change policies. Not as one company, not as 10, not as 1,000, but as tens of thousands. Yes, we can. You know, we can change policies. We can affect how government run things. This is not a journey of, you know, 5 years or 10 years or 20, and it doesn't really matter. You know, this is my point. Like, the journey itself is the destination, is not where it leads to. It could take 100 years, who cares? You know, there's no destination here. And the only destination is the actual journey that we take, and the success will lie in how we build it together. And that's it.
Beautiful.
So that's my piece, you know.
Beautiful. So let me connect with. I hear, I agree with everything that you're saying, and so let me connect with some ideas that I've been working and just starting to develop on. One is, I really think that this idea of building organizations, companies by themselves alone, it doesn't make sense. And maybe it made sense before, it doesn't make sense in the modern ecosystem. So I'm playing with this idea of venture families, so that you build a company as a family of mutual support. And you mentioned economy. I think in the regenerative space, it's really interesting and important to think about multidimensional value flows. Yes, there is money, but then there is also mutual support. You know, I've started this event called The Gathering and many other things because I'm just so frustrated about people feeling alone and unsupported.
Yes, of course.
And most of the time, people don't need somebody to tell them a solution to their problems. They just need somebody to listen. There's this idea from Simon Sinek, 8 minutes. So, and this is near free, right? It just requires a little bit of attention and a little bit of time, not even a lot, right? So it's a coordination failure when we have people feeling unsupported, when we all know we are all one, we're all part of the bigger project and all of this. And so this is something, imagine in a venture family, right? It's not just the CEOs talk to each other, the CTOs talk to each other, the product people, the cleaners. They have a conversation amongst cleaners, all of the different companies, and they can share ideas, they can discuss things which are relevant to them and feel that they're not supported, that they feel that they're supported. So I think this is a really interesting idea going forward for mutual learning, for fundraising together, for growth and development. I work mostly around startups, smaller companies, and everybody knows that they should be supporting their team's development and all of this, but nobody has the resources. Because if you're 5 people, 10 people, even if you're 50 people, it's hard to muster the resources at the level that you would wish to support people's growth and development, professional and personal. But if we're in a venture family of 5, 10 organizations, it's much easier to act like still every company is individual, it's its own business and legal structure, but for learning, for mutual support, for ideas, and then where it makes sense for sharing customers, for sharing other things, right? So I'm really excited of just as people are not very good alone, I have this idea that actually companies will be healthier and more thriving in families. And then also what you get, we have a friend from Evolut 6, he talks about ergodic investing. Imagine you have a family, and naturally in companies, somebody does better, somebody does worse. The person that the organization that's doing better needs people, they need resources. And hiring, finding good people is always a challenge. But some another organization is not doing so well, and they can say, well, here, take these people for a few months, or take them half time, or maybe we're going bankrupt. Great, the other organizations in the group can absorb the people, right? And everybody wins, because you have people who you have relationships with who are on the development path. So hiring is cheap and good. That's great. And for the organizations which are not going so well, and often a business that's in a difficult situation, you're in this challenge of like, it's tough, it's not making sense, but I want to struggle because I don't want my people to lose their jobs. I feel a sense of responsibility. But if you could say, well, here's another organization, they can go use their skills and have an even better career, it'd be like, great, I'll let this one go, I'll move on to the next one. So I think there can be many benefits. It sounded similar, connected somehow to what you were talking about.
Yes.
And then you mentioned the investment fund, and then also this other interrelationship structures. I wonder whether, or I think it's time that we also need to evolve those structures and not just create an investment fund, which is here's the money, good luck. Maybe I'll come to your board meeting and give you shit. But like, you're part of the family and you have the money and the support, the human support, the learning, sharing customers, sharing service providers, sharing these things, right? So it's a multidimensional interrelationship. There's been this structure, probably you have heard, I don't know how closely you're following, of venture studios. Are you following? But it's kind of a top-down system, right? Somebody comes in, they come up with a bunch of ideas, they hire CEOs for doing it. But I believe, but the idea is you share resources, you have best practices on processes, on suppliers, and da da da. But I think we can emerge the same thing bottom up, with companies coming together in a circle as equals and creating these frameworks of mutual support.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's why recently I made an investment in a venture builder or venture studio in Italy. Um, and the good thing is that they have already established an innovation lab. I mean, they work on climate solutions and use AI and deep tech. So even like when you have the ecosystem together, you will be, and you have all this information, you will start spotting inefficiencies and opportunities and things to do. Okay, well, these five are here, but then what's missing is this one. Okay, let's create this one, and then now all of a sudden, the impact of these four companies become 10 times, because it was missing that little piece. And now it's possible because they are together, they are under one umbrella. And to be honest, I mean, when I thought about an evergreen fund and a securitized fund, it wasn't because it was what is not that like, I don't really care about what is the structure because anyway, this shouldn't be run. It was the idea rather than to say that this is the best way forward. It was to pilot the idea where everybody share the success also economically and where you can have the share price. You can avoid IPO, you can avoid exit. I mean, you can avoid the contamination with the existing system where you can even have your own exchange and where members of these communities, they are there and you can exchange or offer liquidity through that exchange for this security, which can be tokenized in that sense to mirror the value of all these companies in the ecosystem, but also from impact perspective. So, and then designing it in such a way where we say, well, you know, some of the things that are not meant to be for profit to begin with, you know, who's going to be doing the blueprints, you know, who's going to be doing this work or that work? Well, this is not everything is a business. So you need to assign what is that part of that value creation from the ecosystem that goes to support these other things. And when you do it systematically, it's beautiful, you know, because the shift that you can make is huge. And who knows? I mean, you know, if you create that in such a way that uh, becomes a model, then can be copied by others, you know, in different geographies, in different, you know, and then they replicate it, and then and then what you say about self-organizing, you know, uh, uh, like how this can evolve, essentially. Um, but you need people to come together. You need people to, um, you know, do this coordinated work together, collaborative work together. Um, and I do believe that companies that will get together, and if they vibrate at a different energy because they've done, you know, the internal work, um, their output and impact to the world is going to be huge, because they will not be, uh, you know, driven necessarily by the linear metrics. You know, they will be playing a totally different game. Um, so, and 2025, the year of action, the year of Mars. Don't believe in astrology, but my teacher, that's what she said.
Well, I'm definitely excited about action and year of action.
Mm.
By the way, as a idea reference point, are you familiar with the Japanese Keiretsu system? It was
The-
Zaibatsu before the war and Keiretsu after the war. They're the big groups. So you've heard of some of them, like you've heard of Toyota, you've heard of Mitsubishi, you
yeah.
might or might not have heard of Mitsui. So they're big groups. They usually had a bank, an insurance company, an international trading company, and a bunch of manufacturers they're all shared relationships, inter ownership, uh, share using the same brand and all of this. So it's interesting. I mean, of course, it was massive. It had a shadow side, but it was absolutely integral to raising Japan from the ashes to the war until the 80s, 90s. You know, as anyone, when a system becomes too big, it starts to become stagnant and monopolistic. And then also it started not, but for 30 or 40 years, it was the backbone of the Japanese economy. In Korea, you have Samsung, you have, I think, Daewoo, and they're much too big. They're like 70% of the economy or something, but or of the export economy. But those structures, it's interesting to look at them, right? Because they do exist.
What is it? What is it called?
Keiretsu,
Okay,
uh,
that's it.
before the war and they were also the backbone of the war economy, which is why they broke them down. But you know, like anything, it reforms. So yeah, and they had a bank, an insurance company, a trading company at at the core, and then some sort of an industrial group.
Mhm.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
It's not exactly what we want, but there is definitely many things to learn from
to learn from. Yeah, yeah.
it.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I mean, that's
And you know, you will look at the analysis and stuff, and they will be largely economic, but they were primarily interrelational groups. This is the big difference in Japan. Business runs on relationships first, money and value second. So that's an interesting reference point. And then in terms of making it happen, so in my mind, I have this, my mental model is conversation, relationship, collaboration, right? We need to talk before we can have a relationship, before we can do stuff together. And since I am not yet, or not at the stage of doing investment and stuff, I've been focusing on fostering the conversation part of the equation. So doing the gathering event here in Portugal, Gian Andrea was at it. Also now I'm organizing, because I really think one of the acupuncture points is this intersection of collaboration technology and regenerative consciousness. So we need those. And I really see a lack of technologies to support these new ways of working together. I'll give you a simple example, which is just a massive problem, which nobody has solved, is startup equity. In an environment where people are working fractionally, and many people, right? It's very easy to get lots of people to help with your startup a few hours or a few tens of hours. But if you're a startup, you don't have money, but try giving out equity to 30 people in small amounts. Good luck. The legal system doesn't support that, right? And just this whole mentality, okay, you and I, we're starting a company. Okay, half you, half me, you know, that doesn't make sense in the modern world. It maybe made sense when we're both working full-time, sitting in an office next to each other. But in a modern world where everybody's working on multiple things and life happens and this and that, it just completely doesn't make sense. It leads to a massive amount of, at worst, founder conflict and court cases. At best, dissatisfaction because somebody feels that somebody else is contributing less or they're contributing more, right? So, and we've been talking about this sweat equity, splitting the pie, and all of this, but we don't have the tools for it. The culture is starting to get there, but we don't have the tools. Spreading of best practices, right? I'm really excited about how AI, for over 10 years, I've been dreaming for an AI team coach, right? Imagine we were able to scale. Sounds like you have access to some really amazing trainings and things, which is great, wonderful. I hope you appreciate how privileged you are. But how do we scale that, right? You know, okay, we make a course, online courses don't work, but I think with AI, imagine an AI team coach that's sitting in all of your chats, that's sitting into all of your meetings and can make suggestions, right? And I think a lot of the suggestions won't even be like, this is what you should do, but here's, you know, your team is not communicating well. Here's a course you should take, or maybe you should talk to this consultant, right? So this idea of a team coach, and then also going along with that, structures to be able to multiply and spread businesses, event ideas, and formats, right? We are so digital, and yet still, if you want to give somebody the idea for to spread a business model, right? Whether it's, for example, in your case, you want to open a branch in a new country. How do you do it? Well, maybe you transfer people, you give them manuals and all of this. It's all pre-internet, right? How do you encode a business as a digital structure with an AI to walk people through the process, right? We have games which walk people through very complex behaviors in a fun way, right? Why is running an event or doing a business so much more cumbersome and painful than playing a game? And as it turns out, most businesses, most things are repetition of something somewhere else, or is something that already exists, maybe something that already exists with a different flavor, different context, but of which 80-90% of it is the same, right? So
Right.
I'm really excited about that area of the tools to support this, the tools to support scaling in the
Yeah.
context of the regenerative collaboration, working ecosystemically and all of this. So I'm doing a, a distributed synchronous online conference, so to speak, because having run a bunch of events, I realized I don't want to be a podcaster and interview everybody. I just need everybody to talk to everybody, record the videos, and then we share them. And that is a way of creating a meta narrative. So Jean Andrea said he'd also be part of that. Uh, yeah, those are the kinds of things that I'm working to further conversation, because I think we need more and more of this kind of conversation, which we had here, by the way, which the AI recorded. I don't know if you're okay with it. We could share it. We need
Yes, yes, please.
we need more of just this dialogue out there.
Hmm.
That's
So how do you suggest bringing it out? I mean, what's your idea?
for this conversation here or in general.
No, no, in general. I mean, this builds up into something
So
else.
So in general, for example, for this sphere, I'm developing this format for this distributed asynchronous conference. So we're going to invite Symbiosis and 10, 50, 100 other organizations working on tools and get them to just talk to each other along certain defined topics. The topics that I'm interested in is business model, financing. So I want to prevent people from floating off too far into philosophy, because that would be nice. But I want to get people to come together. So on the practicals, the second one is the product roadmaps, because my background is in software, right? And what I see is we need to move to a place where the people developing these different tools are not developing standalone things, but developing tools which interoperate and interlink. But again, conversation first and creating awareness so people know what everybody is working on, what their roadmaps are. And then the third one is around team and governance, so how they're organizing and building their teams. Out of these conversations, we're just starting this project. Bunch of people have been really excited, so I think it will work well. My hope is to emerge a cluster of 5 to 10 organizations that are aligned in spirit. The feeling is there, and that there is some compatibility in roadmap, and then move to raising for a portfolio of these companies, saying like, look, we have these things, this is the roadmap. If we get a chunk of money, we can all collaborate closer together, and we can build out this ecosystem of interoperable products, which will have, this 10x impact, as you said, that none of them will achieve if they're grinding out by themselves.
I like the idea. I mean, I see where maybe now I understood, like flipping the venture builder model upside down. I mean, that's what it sounds like. People coming together, or individual companies coming together, becoming an ecosystem, and then saying that, okay, what is missing, and uh, and and then raising capital for that part which is missing, but then the whole ecosystem becomes, the impact of it economically, or um, uh, uh, net positive impact on the well-being becomes multiple folds. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I guess we are talking about the same thing at the end. I guess we have different ways of communicating it, and it's beautiful to see that everything. I've done a lot of things, to be honest, without knowing the reason behind. A moment intuitively right, so I made a call, um, including funding Futura. I mean, years back was one of them. Um, but I always had this feeling that, like they will come together somehow, some way, and they will connect. Uh, Not necessarily that I used to see the visual connection at the time, but I had the faith that it is right, and it will evolve and come together. Now I see it more and more in that sense. So um, you're a person of trust. Uh, uh, you mentioned family. So, G's like my younger brother in that sense. And that makes you my same age brother, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is also, I think, we are reconstructing family in the modern era because we need it, and it's actually interesting because I'm really interested in ancient in history, anthropology, and stuff, and I read an amazing book about Japanese anthropology. The
Hmm.
first anthropologist in the 1920s, he went from village to village, and Japan was so poor, he had to carry his own sack of rice so he had something to eat. And he said, actually, in many households, there was somebody who was part of the family who just came. They were a wanderer, they settled, they started working, and they became part of the family. So
Wow.
I think it's the
Interesting.
creating family by who aligns and who fits is actually a natural thing for us.
Yeah,
So thank
absolutely.
you.
And yeah, and we
I'm
align on the
I'm
mission on
continuing.
Earth. So
Yeah, I'm continuing to talk align with that. I would love to become involved with Futura. I propose I can be of service. But is there anything you can think of that I could be of service to your work?
Um, maybe on this evergreen fund, which like we're actually having a call about it in the maybe in a couple of hours, and Jen Andrea is joining. Jen Andrea and the CEO of the venture builder TechBricks, which we invested in as well. So we are with the fund structure guys. And I wanted to kind of like experiment about all these ideas of, as you said, new ways of making decisions, new governance, but also companies coming together and saying, okay, what is missing? And then if you go out there and actually you want to raise capital, it's easy to raise capital. You can buy on Bloomberg, you can buy it through your broker bank. If we create an exchange that is and tokenizing the asset itself of the fund, we can offer that liquidity right there, and people can, just buy even a small fraction of it. So we can ease the access of funding of these ideas. People will still own one share that represents the whole ecosystem. So, something fails, doesn't work, great, it doesn't matter, it's not failing. Resources goes to, all that. So there's a lot of thinking. I mean, most of the ideas, everything that you were talking about, it's kind of like I see it as a ground of experimenting all that. I want to bring a, a whole majority of share inside that fund as well and buy into the security. So I want to walk the talk, and also, any investment that I make through that fund. But then it's a way to get people together and have experiment from from the outset, from the inset, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely what I can see, I do many things, I have many skills, but definitely what of I can definitely bring is thinking through and designing those non-financial flow interrelations.
Yes,
So creating the flow, mutual support, flow of learning, finding
yeah,
different ways that these companies in the group and the fund can support each other. And the other one is
yes,
narrative and storytelling. I've become a really big fan of Build in Public. I really believe at this point, if you're regenerative, you have to be built in public because this is a key way of connecting to the ecosystem
absolutely.
and baking that in. And, anybody can post, but what do you post? And it's creating the rituals and the habits around it is the hard part. But when you start doing it, it's really supportive
Absolutely.
and it's really energizing. So I
Yeah.
think designing that both into the storytelling of the fund and also doing it into the interrelationships and supporting the organizations in the fund, I think is definitely something I could bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on that community part, because when we create this secondary exchange for us, then the members of this exchange are the community that supports all that, and they become owners of that ecosystem as well. So having impact influencers, I mean, I'm calling them impact influencers, but to um, share that through storytelling and bring more support, and this becomes like you have a foundation of millions of people that they support that ecosystem, then you have a massive shift with time, and it is doable. you know it is doable when it's not
And
done on like come to me or I come to you, but this is more let's come together, you know.
and
So that's a
and
difference.
you I remember earlier on when you were talking, you said, "Oh, people only recognize money, and money drives the world." And I didn't want to interrupt you, but in the back of my mind, I was partially disagreeing with you because actually, what drives the world is stories, it's narratives. And yes, we're used to narratives need to be hooked in a guru or something, but there's lots of narratives like capitalism. Who's the guru of capitalism? I don't know. There's many of them. It just kind of runs, right? So creating the narrative and creating the story. And it's actually interesting because I'm not a fan of crypto as it is now, but being a caricature of things, caricatures are useful and interesting because they show some underlying truth, right? And the whole meme coin thing is a caricature, and yet it shows the power of narrative, right? Because the meme coin is pure story, right? And
Yeah,
who believes in it, who supports it in all of this. So the power of story and narrative. And of course, if this story is empty, then it's just like a casino, there's nothing. Yet at the same time, if you have something that's meaningful and deeply purposeful, but you're not telling the story well, you're not doing justice to your idea. So again, you need the strong story and the strong underlying base. uh, and here, yeah, I think this is telling the story well to get people to understand the value of this new idea. I mean, I had to go through this a lot with the gathering, right? Because the idea is it's an outdoors, it's a festival like Burning Man or a music festival, but it's also a trade show, it's a conference. It's supposed to be for people who are doing projects to come together. And I see people struggle, right? It's a party, I should party. Or it's a business conference, I should do talks. And I'm like, it's all of those things and yet more. How can you be creative? So it's been a fun challenge and seeing like how people. I have these two boxes. It doesn't fit into the box. So here, similarly, right? If you want to do something new, you need to get people to kind of break out of their boxes, but you can't ask them to go too far like you said, right? You can only get people to do one step. So I think in order to really create something new, great storytelling around it. And in this case, not the storytelling. And this is something that I'm really interested in, this idea of meta narrative, of how to create a story which is not told by the one guru, but which emerges from all of the conversation of everybody that's participating.
Beautiful. I love that. And we can take this later on. Is one of the things that I was looking at investing in this new impact network that a guy I know from Harvard Business School, a colleague, he's working on. It's called Updeed. That probably would actually play a role in amplifying the narrative, the future narrative, in a media channel that we would have, let's say, that shares the same values. Let's put it that way. So we can talk about that in a different on a different call. What is one thing call to action from your side, Victor?
I mean,
From my side, that you need from me.
Yes, start weaving me into the fund sounds great, and weave me into some conversations and see if I can be of value.
Thank you so much. I got some stuff coming up on trainings and all that we're doing internally. I'm going to be sharing that with you. Some things maybe on the conscious evolution retreat. I think there's a lot of value there that we can probably work together on. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff, and 1 hour is not enough to.
But it's good. I hope the 1 hour leaves us. It certainly leaves me. I hope it leaves you with the energy and enthusiasm to continue the conversation. So
absolutely, brother. Of course. I mean, we would not have got here from the beginning if I, did not believe that we can move together. And the beautiful thing about, you mentioned relationships, and for me, relationships is more connected. How a relationship does support my mission on earth, and my mission on earth is using my talents in service of greater good, which I like to believe that this is the mission on earth of anybody. And there's no more relationship that I like to preserve and grow and nurture than this type of relationship. So it's a feed and a food for the soul. So thank you and appreciate you, Victor.
yes, thank you very much, and looking forward to continuation.
Yes. I'll invite you in on the next thing when it comes to the fund. So we're kicking it off today. So we'll loop you in.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.